I would like to say it has been the privilege of my career to serve as the CEO of BBC News.
Deborah Turness, outgoing head of news, this morning insisted the BBC still had much to be proud of.
Of course our journalists aren't corrupt. Our journalists are hard-working people who strive for impartiality, and I will stand by their journalism.
Is there institutional bias at the BBC?
There is no institutional bias. Mistakes are made, but there's no institutional bias.
A few hours later, there was another shock for the institution she is now leaving. A letter from President Trump's lawyers sent to the BBC chairman.
Has he said that he's going to be suing the BBC?
I do not know that yet, but he's a litigious fellow, so we should be prepared for all outcomes.
The Sunday Times quoted friends of yours as saying that every day you open Pandora's box and more bad stuff comes out.
Who are these friends? Can you know?
The departing Director General and the woman he later hired to run BBC News in happier times. Both have quit over allegations that the BBC failed to act properly when it discovered that a Panorama programme had edited together 2 moments from a Donald Trump speech just before the attack on Congress 4 years ago, which were actually said nearly an hour apart.
We're going to walk down to the Capitol and we fight. We fight like hell.
It's more than a year since the Panorama programme was broadcast, 10 months since the BBC editorial committee discussed the controversial edit. 5 months since the same committee discussed a response from BBC management saying the edit was not misleading. A disgruntled member of that committee, former Sunday Times journalist Michael Prescott, then wrote to the board complaining that the BBC had repeatedly ignored problems flagged by internal inquiries. Someone then leaked that letter to the Telegraph, and after days of silence, the BBC chairman today apologised for an error of judgment.
Now, in hindsight, it would have been better to have acted earlier, but we didn't.
Did you sweep it under the carpet?
No. Well, it depends what you mean by sweeping it under the carpet. It was public. We discussed it.
The board of the BBC and the BBC Guidelines Committee, meeting in private, discussed it. Divisions in those gatherings, which include political appointees from the Tory government era, led some to say there'd been a coup.
I think the suggestion of coup is fanciful. Honestly, the board of the BBC is not a bunch of wet people who will just fall over. No, and it's unfair and it's disrespectful to the members of the board to say that because they feel strongly about something, that somehow it's to do with their history.
So he just wants a photo, then we're done.
Tim Davie joins a long line of BBC Director Generals who've ended up out of the job early.
I was called in by the chairman and the vice chairman and told that I was to leave immediately.
I am today announcing that I've resigned from the BBC.
I have decided that the honourable thing to do is to step down from the post of Director General.
I think this is by far the most serious because it's different. It's not just some other row between the government of the day and the BBC, which has been the norm, if you like. It's not just about one single error, which it has been sometimes in the past. It's about a deep cultural and political divide, which really mirrors what's going on in the nation as a whole. And it probably goes back to Brexit, and there have been a series of issues since then where one part of the population, let's broadly call them the right, feel that they haven't been represented properly on the BBC. At the same time, you've got people on the left who feel strongly about this as well. And the BBC struggling to perform its duties of an impartial news service with this flack flying around all the time.
Incoming flack has never come from across the Atlantic. Last night, President Trump put out a message celebrating that BBC bosses are all quitting or being fired because they were caught doctoring my very good, perfect speech of January 6th. His White House press spokeswoman retweeted that, adding, BBC News is dying because they are anti-Trump fake news. Everyone should watch GB News.
Devastating day for the BBC. I mean, and Nigel Farage was talking about it. He somehow manages to get his press conferences just at the right time.
If you put yourself in Donald Trump's shoes, I think you'll understand why, when I had a chat with him on Friday, he made his feelings on the subject known to me in no uncertain terms and not in a quotable form.
You're famously a long-distance trail runner. Does that endurance help with the job?
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, you need to, in this job, you need to escape at times, I'm telling you that.
The BBC chairman and board didn't want him to run away from the job, but must now look for a replacement, just as the organisation approaches a critical negotiation with the government over its entire future. So, BBC chiefs are left in that building tonight staring at a letter from Donald Trump's lawyers saying if they don't get a retraction and an apology for that Panorama by Friday, he's going to be suing them for $1 billion in damages. And this is a president who actually has quite a good record of taking on media companies with actions like this since he's been in the White House. The other letter that we've seen today, though, is the one that came from the BBC chairman, went to the MPs on the Culture Committee, and in that you see Samir Shah saying that although we have investigated all these things that were in the leaked letter that went to the Telegraph, we're going to re-investigate them. And I don't think that anybody will feel any more encouraged by some of the stuff that emerged in Samir Shah's interview as well. You get a sense of a board that is divided. I'm hearing about an editorial guidelines committee that is seriously fractious, and it just doesn't feel as though the chairman of the BBC, who wanted to hold on to this onto this director general and didn't manage it, that he is that sure-footed.
Gary Gibbon in Westminster. Well, earlier I spoke to the veteran BBC broadcaster David Dimbleby, and I started by asking about that edit of the Trump January 6th speech and what had essentially gone wrong.
First of all, I've no idea why that wasn't addressed as soon as it was spotted, because it's obviously a disgrace and should have been. But how that and some argument about what's going on transgender rights within the BBC can be used as a kind of really one of the most violent assaults on the BBC's independence that I've seen in my lifetime. I just don't understand what's going on. I mean, I hope something will come out, and I'm sure it will over the next few days, that we discover why both the Director General and the head of news suddenly decided to resign, and why the head of news wanted to resign and was told by the board she couldn't. I mean, it's a complete mystery.
I mean, isn't it a basic error that they looked at this in January, they discussed it in May, and they defended it rather than say it was obviously a bad edit that should have been corrected?
It should have been corrected at the time, and the editor of Panorama should have been fired, in my view, if he knew it was done. I mean, it's ridiculous. And to put the BBC in a position where President Trump can legitimately say, liar BBC, you know, and use that as a stick to beat the BBC with all the work the BBC does all over the world. I mean, I'm in Nairobi, where the BBC World Service, you know, does massive work all over Africa and everything. I'm a huge supporter of everything the BBC does, and to be tripped up by something like this seems to me absurd. And I don't know what the chairman's going to do. I haven't spoken to him. I have no idea. But he's got to find a new director general. He's got to find a new head of news, the two key positions. And then somebody's got to say, what on earth went wrong? How did we get to this point? Because a vast organization like the BBC can't be held to ransom by 2 incidents or 3 incidents. It's absurd.
Right. I mean, you talk about individuals who are trying to destroy the BBC. There's a lot of speculation that one of the members of the BBC board, Robbie Gibb, who's a former editor, is one of the most critical of BBC journalism at the moment. Do you think he should just come out and say what he thinks, or should he be got rid of from the board?
He's always been out on the attack. But then the board of the BBC needs to have people who are on both left and right. You have a board made up of people with different opinions, and if you're a good chairman or chairwoman or chairperson, you handle those people and you allow their voices to be heard, but you don't allow them to dominate the narrative.
And do you think they are dominating the narrative?
I think they are, and I think they're aided and abetted by, you know, obviously the leaking of the Prescott letter. And there are people who write regularly for the Telegraph. Charles Moore is one who makes no secret of the fact that he hates the BBC and thinks it does a terrible job. But you can't just get rid of people like Robbie Gibb. I mean, I think he should come out in the open and say what he thinks. I think he prefers to work behind the scenes, but that he should sort of rule the roost somehow, or it should be thought that it's a conspiracy by him. I mean, the Board of Governors can't allow a conspiracy within the board. It's ridiculous.
And do you think there is a bias problem within the BBC? I mean, the BBC attracts a certain type of person. It's still dominated by university-educated, middle class people from similar backgrounds, isn't it?
I think the culture of the BBC needs attention and always has done. I don't think you can conclude, though, that simply because people have been to university and are middle class and educated, they should have some particular political bias, which is what the far right accuses the BBC of having. But I honestly don't think on balance that you can accuse the BBC of a permanent left-wing or liberal bias.
You once wanted to run the BBC. If you were taking over now, how would you fix this problem of perception?
First of all, I would absolutely say I would make an apology for the Trump thing, and I would, if I could find out when that was known about and who knew about it, and I don't know whether Deborah Turness did or didn't or what happened, of course, I'd have their guts for garters. I mean, that absolutely goes against the whole principle of what the BBC does. And then I would simply try to steady the ship by saying, look, there's much more to the BBC than one report about Donald Trump. This is a vast organization, and I'd have to persuade the government of the day that was what we were going to do. And then I'd go back into the argument, which is interminable, about how it's going to be funded, which, of course, is behind all this as well, that the license fee is unfair and that people don't watch BBC anymore. And therefore, it's a fair game to have a good attack on it. And maybe on the far right, they think we can destroy it.
Do you think there is a danger the game is up for public service broadcasting? I mean, we have the Americans wanting to buy ITV. We have the BBC now facing being sued by Donald Trump the way American broadcasters have and have caved in. And Nigel Farage on the horizon. I mean, it's not looking good, is it?
It's under threat, I'd put it like that. I think if you talk to the British public about the BBC and whether they want an independent broadcaster or whether they want the American model of everybody wearing their political views on their sleeve, CNN on the left. I remember CNN on the left when Trump lost the election to Biden, one of their presenters, mind you, on air, actually crying and saying, I'm weeping with relief that this has happened, that Trump has been defeated. I mean, that's not independent journalism, and I would hate it if our landscape of television in particular, despite all the challenges it faces, if it became a place where I could, for instance, wear my political heart on my sleeve, which I never have done.
David Dimbleby, thank you very much.
Thank you.